Okay, planning board, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines will remain off. Go for it.
Welcome to the Town of East Hampton Planning Board's March 5th meeting, 2025. We have a number of work session items on and a couple of regular meeting items as well, boards of review and old file map modifications. We're going to go slightly out of order today. We're going to start with the Franzetti sub-waiver review. And Dan, I think you're the applicant for Franzetti. Okay.
Yeah, let's skip it. We'll do it later, and I'll cover if Dan's gone.
Okay, all right. We'll come back to you. Don't go away.
I'm gonna bump you up.
Okay, we're gonna bump you to the top. All right, instead we're gonna go to 2 Plank Road and 4 Plank Road. And Bill, are you here for that? Yeah, okay. Dan, that's yours, and it is Lou with the board. Wait for a second. We'll let Dan do his pitch, and then we'll let you comment.
All right. Well, good evening. So there it goes, loaded. Shooting planning board. So this is the application, site plan special permit application for 2 Plank Road. The property itself, as you can see here, just to give you some context, it's located on the northern side of Plank Road in East Hampton within the CI Commercial Industrial Zoning District. The sites themselves are nearly fully uncleared of naturally occurring vegetation and situated in several areas of important environmental consideration. These include Suffolk County Pine Barrens region, South Fork Groundwater Protection Area, Suffolk County Groundwater Management Zone 5, and the town's water recharge overlay district, all of which identify the parcel of importance to groundwater protection and recharge of the town's sole source aquifer. I'll just give you some context. You can see the subdivision here. It's got an 8-lot subdivision, again, all owned the CI, and it's one of the few actual commercial industrial subdivisions we have within the town of East Hampton. That's also located within the water recharge overlay district. So it has a couple of important considerations that we'll kind of go throughout the evaluation. But in terms of the site plan itself, and I'll take switch the screen here now. Work. There you go. So the proposal itself is made to construct a new 1-story, about 6,840 square foot service commercial building, which is on this specific property, which is actually referred to as Lot 1 within the Turnpike Commercial Center subdivision. The proposed building is to be divided into 4 rentable commercial units. Each consists of an office space, a bathroom, and a larger foyer area, accessible via an overhead door and a standard side entrance. 14 parking stalls you can see are also proposed, and a truck loading space to service these units, in addition to a new IAOWTS system to service the building. Ultimately, one thing you want to note, it is important to note that alongside this application, a separate one has been submitted for the 4 Plank Road for very almost nearly identical development. You can kind of see that here on the site plan. Both these lots are proposed to be connected via a common driveway, which takes access from the northern side of Plank Road. Ultimately, the comments are very similar, and therefore we'll kind of try to sum this up together. However, there's a few small differences that we'll touch upon at the end for the other application. So in terms of the proposed development itself, this is unlisted action pursuant to SECRA, Chapter 120 of the Town Code. So to move forward on this process, the applicant will need to prepare and submit a short Form EF Part 1 for review. We've indicated in the memo this should be prepared using the DEC's mapper, and there's a link in there for resources, how to submit that. Once it's submitted, the planning department is going to review it for comments and necessary revisions. But ultimately, once it's found to be acceptable version is submitted to the planning board, we will recommend that the planning board request complete agency status for this application. Now, this application was technically reviewed about January 2024 as a preliminary site plan application. But there was a lot of comments issued to the applicants at that time, some of which had been addressed as part of this most recent submission. There is a couple comments here that haven't been addressed based on the review of the plans most recently, and therefore they are repeated kind of throughout this evaluation. But we did attach the preliminary evaluation and those comments to the back of the eval for the board's reference. And again, if there's any questions on those, we're happy to address them as part of this review. The other important note in terms of the context is, again, as I mentioned before, this is located within the Turnpike Commercial Center subdivision. There is a lot of conditions that are required as part of that subdivision, really giving its location the Water Recharge Overlay District. They were summarized very extensively during the preliminary review. In this evaluation, we kind of started implementing them throughout the different sections, so we'll refer to it often throughout this. But again, those are all listed as part of the preliminary review and attached if the board has any questions regarding them. So finally getting into the project itself, so 2 special permits are required for this application, one of which is service commercial and the other of which is multiple industrial complex. Regarding the service commercial use, so this is, as we said, it's special permit and has specific standards, safeguards of the town code of how it should be established. The only really standard that's directly applicable to this review is that for a specific standard saying that for up to 2 service commercial uses can be permitted for every 20,000 square feet of lot area. So this lot itself is about just over 40,000 square feet in size. So therefore, up to 4 service commercial uses can be permitted on the site if the planning board finds it acceptable. It's important to note that there are a couple of considerations that are in the evaluation that kind of help determine that acceptability about the service commercial, but ultimately, given the size, it is something that could be permissible. Hold on. Okay. But again, as we mentioned before, there's also the second special permit use as multiple industrial complex. So technically, based on the town code definition, any commercial lot that has more than 2 uses, also has shared parking and sewage treatment is considered multiple industrial complex. There are a bit more standards regarding that. Within the special permit code, which has been attached. A lot of those are kind of more about the site development itself and basically the location acceptability of it. But there is one specifically regarding the required density. And again, as we've indicated, because of the service commercial standards, it is something that the project does seem to comply with as currently configured. So ultimately, the one biggest thing with this is that because these service commercial units are proposed to be rented out, at least as it's been indicated throughout the cover letter, we are recommending the applicant provide measures to ensure that the uses being permitted, used, and rented out are actually service commercial and fall within that scope. I think it's concern here is if any activity is proposed that is outside of that scope, then you can't, then 4 uses wouldn't be permissible. Only 2 uses will be permissible, as is of right with the town code. And that's something that we just want to make sure and it's important to consider as part of this application. So going towards the actual design and development itself, the planning department reviewed the site plan, the submitted plans with respect to the dimensional requirements of the CI zone and the water recharge overlay district. The project does appear to comply with nearly all of these. We just had a few minor comments regarding this. The first one is with required setbacks. So these have been provided in the application form. They aren't indicated on the site plan itself as was requested during the preliminary review. So something that is required for the town code and should be added to the plans. The other comment regarding this had to do with the total lot coverage requirements. So these were requested during the preliminary review, and the applicants have complied with the request and submitted them calculations on the plan. What's important to note is while both these comply with the more restrictive requirements of the water recharge overlay district, the total lot coverage specifically is very close to the maximum permitted. It's proposed about 14,678 square feet, which is about 36.5% of the total lot area, or a maximum of 16,000 square feet, or 40% of the total lot area is permitted. So that's something that it's important to consider, especially as we get into the later comments regarding design and the parking areas, et cetera. They're a bit close to what's there, so potential changes might be a little difficult as currently configured. Diving into the parking areas themselves, So the proposed project, as you can see, involves building 14 parking spaces and 1 truck loading space to service the building. You can see 7 of these spaces are located directly south, right in front of the building, while there's another 7 spaces located on the western yard of the project site. So in order, first, in terms of the number of spaces proposed here, the applicant used the calculation of 1 space per 500 square feet of service commercial to calculate the demand on site. Now, technically, there is no service commercial parking requirement in the town code. However, for other site plans that have been approved for service commercial appear to have used the same requirement. We referenced specifically the development of lot 5 in this valuation, which actually had a service commercial building at the exact same size. They estimated the parking requirement to be 13.7, which rounded up to 14. It's the same estimate that the applicants have provided for this site. So given that there is past precedent here and it seems to have been used in the past, it's something that we don't have any issue with. However, it's something the board may just want to discuss to ensure it's appropriate for this project site. The other comment regarding parking had to do with the more about the dimensional standards. So one thing that was asked for in the last review was kind of making sure the spaces comply with the town code for dimensions. These don't really seem to be directly applied, have been provided on the plans, and something that is required and should be revised here. There was a comment about during the preliminary review, also about the setbacks of these structures. So as you see, drive aisles and park areas are proposed directly along the property line here, where a minimum setback, accessory yard setback of 50 feet is required. So the board did previously support the idea of waiving the setback waiver, which they are authorized to do under the planning board's guidelines policy. It typically is the interest of good planning, and there's a bunch of considerations that are involved in that. However, with this most recent application, we did have a bit of a concern with the parking area, and something that we are saying the board may want to hold their response on at the moment just because of this. But I'm going to, specifically speaking, you can see that there's these parking areas in the western yard and proposed almost in tandem, which means that one space is almost right directly in front of the other space and has only one point of access for that driveway. And this is something that we don't typically recommend in the town, to be appropriate for sites, particularly given the potential conflicts between site users and exiting and entering the property. However, something that we are recommending the planning board may want to discuss with the applicant, just to talk about how they're expecting it to function and operate and whether or not it could be acceptable for this project site. Again, generally speaking, we didn't have an issue with the potential waiver of setbacks during that previous review, but the concern with the parking areas and how they're going to function kind of became a bigger question, at least on our end, regarding the whether or not it'd be appropriate at this time. And I guess going alongside there, the actual, sorry, zoom out there. Going alongside with that comment, there was also the comments about the actual, how we access the site and the common driveway itself. So as you can see, the common driveway has been proposed to access both these lots, as we discussed. This is something that was actually required for the Turnpike Commercial Center subdivision for lots 1 and 2, which, as you can see here, they successfully complied with. So while we don't have any issue with the common driveway process itself, several comments were issued by the town consultant engineer who reviewed these plans regarding the layout itself. Really, he had a few, I guess, to summarize the concerns promptly. He had a bit of a concern with the way it's currently configured with the alignment of the site plan itself. So as you can see, the way it currently looks, the common driveway enters mostly through the 4-plank road site and then moves northern and then kind of goes through the center of the light. So there's a bit of an alignment change there. It's a little hard to tell here, but a little bit of alignment change going through to the site, whereas the town consultant engineer recommended that it might be more appropriate and fit that that arrangement be provided where it is more straight, more of a 90-degree angle, straight line access into the site. The only problem with this is, and this is something the engineer brought up, is that there is this light easement here, which is supposed to be for a pad mount transformer that was recorded as part of the subdivision. And we don't really know, have documentation at this moment regarding the restrictions of that easement. It's something that we did ask during the preliminary review. of the application hasn't since been submitted, and therefore we're requesting to be submitted again. But the problem is, what the engineer brought up was potentially if any of this area could be used for the driveway and doesn't have to be preserved off just for the permanent transformer, you could have potentially avoid some of those concerns and make more of a straight line access into the site. And also help reduce some of the coverage that's on Four Plank Road and make it more even between the two lots. So that's where those comments come from, and they are provided a little bit more in detail in the actual engineer's memo, which is attached. And again, I'm happy to discuss those further if it's needed. But something that we just recommend the board really want to consider tonight. The last thing that has to do with this, and this is kind of hinted at before, is the actual dimensions for the drive aisles, driveways, terminal areas doesn't really seem to be provided on these plans, and something that would also help assess whether or not they are compliant with the town code standards and is required by the town code. So we are saying that those should be added to the site plan. Additionally, it's an engineering comment. The actual location of the easement itself, the boundaries of it have not been depicted on this plan. And again, just to understand where it's going to be located, the exact dimensions and performance of it, that's something that should also be provided on this plan. So from there we had a comment about the traffic generation. So the Turnpike Commercial Center subdivision that created these parcels back in 1993 had a specific condition that the overall vehicle trips per hour generation cannot exceed 200 trips per hour for the entire subdivision. So this is including all the lots within the subdivision. So at the moment, the subdivision itself does contain about 8 lots, and if you average that out, it ends up being about 25 trips per hour per site. So the applicants have submitted traffic generation reports that ended up ultimately using the use as general light industrial with the potential maximum, an estimated cars and employees of 14, which is based on the parking requirement, and they ended up finding an hourly trip rate of 7 trips per hour. Now, the town consultant engineer found these to be acceptable, and as well as us. The one comment we have is obviously this doesn't, and this is a little bit of deviation from the evaluation itself. The one thing we note is that, right, this gives generation reports just for the site itself, but doesn't give it within the context of the subdivision itself. So one thing that we could do to help support this decision the board may want to discuss is that we could try to look at the adjacent sites to see what the approved reports have been, the generation trips of those, just to make sure that this won't exceed that standard. And something we originally, again, had a question about whether the applicant should provide this, but again, they might not have access to the appropriate information. So something that we as the planning department could provide for them and help support the board too, just so they get a better understanding of where this is supported in the context of this subdivision. The one thing I will note is that 7 trips per hour is for each individual site. So 2 Plank Road will have 7 trips per hour, and so will 4 Plank Road. So it ends up being 14 overall. And that's, yeah. So I guess from there, we'll move on from the kind of the site access and go to a little bit, some of the last details here. So drainage and stormwater control. So the proposed project involves regrading the site to create a roughly 1 to 2 foot slope towards the eastern end of the common driveway area. You kind of see that here. The installation of several catch basins, again, towards the entrance of Plank Road and the end of the common driveway will also be proposed to kind of capture stormwater, drainage on site. The town consultant engineer reviewed these and the calculations which were provided on the other plans and found them to be most compliant with the design standards and requirements of the town code. The only thing that was requested at this time was that earthwork calculations be provided to help in order to determine this accurately. Otherwise, as mentioned, and we'll mention later in this review, it is recommended that the planning board's groundwater protection policy standard be met for the building drainage, access ramps, and loading docks. This was discussed extensively during the preliminary review, and given the site's location, again, water recharge overlay district, and all these other important environmental areas, something we are recommending for this evaluation as well. I'll touch upon this a little bit later on in the review when it comes to some of the clearing standards, but it is something that's also we feel would be appropriate and at least when development of this site. So alongside drainage, there is also, as we mentioned before, a new IA system proposed to for wastewater treatment on the site. The applicants actually provided a new sanitary detail sheet depicting the systems proposed and providing accurate calculations regarding Suffolk County standards. So based on the calculations provided, it does appear that the proposed sanitary flow rate at 276.6 gallons per day for this site, and for Four Plank Road, it's 273, just above it, does comply with the Suffolk County Groundwater Management Zone 5, which permits a maximum sanitary flow rate of 300 gallons per acre per day. These flow rates are based on the size of surface commercial building at 6,840 square feet and classification as general industrial uses defined by Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Again, we found these calculations to be acceptable, and also lines of town consultant engineer who said the same. But ultimately, it's just important to note that these systems will have to be approved by Suffolk County as part of this review process. So, apologies for that. So going back to kind of what we talked about before with the water recharge overlay district and the groundwater protection policies. So alongside what we mentioned before with the coverages, the water recharge overlay does have specific regulations regarding clearing the development. Given that the site is zoned within the commercial industrial district, the applicant is permitted to clear up to 50% of the total lot area. Current calculations have been provided on this plan, which indicate the clearing proposed is 18,952 square feet, or roughly 57.2% of the lot area. Again, where the maximum 20,000 square feet or 50% is permissible. So as we note, again, it does comply with the town code. The only thing that's important that we want the board to take consideration is that this does leave very little room for, potential errors, future expansion, or areas for outdoor storage should they ever be contemplated. So some of the board may wish to discuss more in detail with the applicant, especially consider potential changes to the parking areas or drive aisles. It does seem it is a bit constrained as currently configured. So, making sure that the proposed project can meet this, the building itself, the parking areas, et cetera, is important consideration for this project. I want to add alongside that too is during the preliminary review, we did recommend that the development plans themselves be designed to comply with the revised planning board groundwater protection policy. Due to its location within all these important areas, environmental consideration, and the water recharge overlay district, again, adherence to these standards will help prevent accident spills, leaks, or regular use of commercial industrial chemicals from contaminating the groundwater resources, and may also help to ensure the proposed project can meet the specific special permit criteria set forth for both surface commercial and multiple industrial complex, which does include more of the environmental considerations. And this is something the board agreed upon last time during the preliminary review, but just someone recommended be reaffirmed as part of the formal site plan review comments. Going on to the last few comments, there were comments about landscaping. This was something that was asked for during the preliminary review be provided. It doesn't appear that information has been submitted regarding this. So again, we'll recommend that this is something that does be provided for this site. But one thing we will comment and note about is that for other sites in the subdivision, they were required to have heavy evergreen screening around the pad transformer. Now, obviously wasn't indicated on this plan, but something that we are just recommending to be incorporated to this as well. Again, for that visual barrier, but also just be consistent with the subdivision approvals in the site plan. Site plan approvals in the subdivision. Going on from there, the applicants also included a lighting plan with their most recent submission, including the size, dimensions, and specification of the lighting proposed. So we reviewed these and found almost the actual picture itself appear to be primarily compliant with the town code. The only comment we really had is that the does appear to be a bit of small light spill located in the southeast corner, the southern property line of the site. Now, it's a little tricky because the town code, the general code for lighting standards, does say that the way it infers is essentially that no light spill could be reflected over the property line, basically saying 0-foot candle should be here. However, there also are planning board policies and guidelines which say that up to 0.1 can be permitted, which is shown on the site here. Now, given that this site, again, obviously currently being developed alongside each other, the light spill is a very small portion along the common driveway area. We didn't find any, we had no objection to it originally as part of the site plan review process, but it is something that the board may want to consider, especially because other sites have, it isn't always often where we typically permit any light spill over the property lines. So ultimately the board may want to consider this. And there was a bit of and when we get to the questions later, a bit of a revised question too regarding the lighting, just to more clearly discuss the appropriateness of the lighting as opposed to getting more comments about it and feedback. So going on from there, the one important part of this aspect project that was discussed during the preliminary review is that it was noted that this site is, and actually the entirety of the subdivision itself is located within an archaeological survey buffer zone, which is established for Scott, per the Cultural Resource Information System, which is maintained and run by New York State's Historic Preservation Office. So based on the site history itself and the adjacent lots, it doesn't appear that a phase 1 archaeological investigation has been required for any of the lots within the subdivision. But the one thing that we will note is that the survey itself wasn't established at the time of those site plan approvals, and was almost actually established along the exact same time as the most recent site plan approval, so it might not be considered at the time. This is something that we are changing from the memo as well, but given that the site is currently vacant at the moment and is located within the potentially archaeological survey zone, that is typically the grounds in the past for the site plan to require, the planning board to require that a phase 1 archaeological investigation be conducted. So it's something that they may want to discuss as part of this review process. Again, this is just revising what we said during the review, saying it may not be required. Just considering the site's location, what's there, it's something that may want to be considered as part of this process. So going to the last few things, as we mentioned before, the engineer reviewed these plans and issued several comments, which we've discussed. There were a couple of things that we didn't address upon in the memo and are more incorporated the engineer's comments. We are recommending that should be addressed and are attached to the review for the board's consideration. Fire marshal comments or something else that we also haven't received at this time, but will ultimately be required in the end, and something that we recommend once they're received, the applicant do respond to the comments accordingly. Finally, we did list other agencies that would be involved in this project, such as the ARB, Suffolk County Department of Health Services, Suffolk County Planning Commission, and Office of Fire Prevention. There's a lot of details provided regarding in the application regarding where they're required, but ultimately just want to make the applicants aware of that. And finally, we've provided a list of necessary elements of site plans, which some of which were requested on the preliminary review and some of which are new as part of this application. I won't run through those for you guys now, but again, if there's any questions on those, these are something that we are recommending be submitted for future plans, given that they are required by the town code. So in conclusion, obviously you can see the way the site is designed itself. We do recommend, it's a highly efficient approach to developing this property. Given that applicants do appear to try to mitigate clearing and coverage in certain areas. However, with several known issues between the pros common driveway area, parking stalls, navigation aisles, and the listed dimensions, it's not possible to determine with certainty whether the proposed project meets minimum zoning standards requiring the CI zone and the water recharge overlay district. As mentioned under the clearing regulations section, again, and dimensional conformance, the lot coverage, the total lot coverage, and clearing calculations do leave little room for potential error or future expansions with this site should they ever be contemplated. So this does appear to be kind of one of the more critical points of this evaluation, determining whether or not the project site is suitable for location for the building of this size and design. But overall, the project does remain incomplete pending the submission of additional details as described throughout the memo. And I'm happy to answer any questions should the board have them.
Great, thanks, Dan, very much, very thorough. Does the applicant wish to be heard before the board has its conversation? Would you like to be heard now, or?
No, I think you should have your conversation. I'm not sure what I can add to that.
Should we do them both in conjunction?
Yeah, we're going to be doing both. Did we point out any differences?
So
with 4 Plank Road, I can just show you the site plan quick. There really isn't many major differences. The one thing I will point out is that we mentioned those coverage comments before. The total lot coverage is higher for this lot. So where the other one was about just over 36%, total lot coverage is around 39.9% here, where 40% is the maximum permissible. So it is a little bit more constrained.
Okay.
The other thing that we noted too, and this was more mentioned during the preliminary review, is that there's a dumpster area shown here, and kind of what is turnaround area with fencing proposed. There wasn't a lot of information provided about this and how this will function, and actually the design of, details about it were something that we recommend to provide as well.
Okay, good.
So the second structure is more constrained because it's a bigger structure or a smaller lot?
No, so it has more coverage, and what we're assuming it is because of the way the driveway is. So the common driveway is more in Plank Road in this entrance area, so that's where it seems to come from. But the building is the same size, the parking spaces provided are exactly the same. It's almost a reverse of the other site. It's just small design changes that made it.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so we are considering both 2 and 4 together here for purposes of this discussion.
And when I mention the points that I'm going to mention, it'll cover both.
Okay.
They're mirror images, so. Yeah, I think the issues on both of them are not difficult issues. They're issues that can be resolved. They just need more time with the applicant to figure out what to do on them. There are a few things that I think are important that I want to emphasize that I hope will become conditions of approval. The first one is the groundwater protection policy standards, that they be imposed and implemented and adhered to, especially where this is located in the groundwater protection area. So I don't have to go through those standards. We all know what that means. And sort of connected to that is that this is important within that regard as well, is that we need those assurances. And also I would try to make that conditional as well, that these units be used as service commercial and not anything more heavy than that type of use. The other items, I think the setback waiver is something that I'm in favor of. I mean, the reason that it's a setback from each other's parking areas, so it doesn't affect anyone other than themselves. So I think that's not an issue. The parking, it seems to be fine as well, except for that issue with the tandem parking. I think it's, Dan and the planning department had a good idea. I can't think of any other way to resolve it other than to designate each of the 2 sets. Well, there's 3 sets of 2. So each 2 parking spaces be designated to a particular unit. So they would have to choose which units. That's really the best that can be done there, unless somebody has a brighter idea. And I also think it's important that the truck navigation aisles be depicted and designated. And the light spill, I think, is so minor. Also, not only because the light spill itself is minor, but the location of these properties, I don't think it's going to bother anybody if there's a little light spill over the borders of the property. So I don't think that's an issue. The other interesting thing, and I don't know how you correct this or solve this, the subdivision calls for no more than 200 trips per day, right? And the other lots have been already developed, so that means that 150 of those trips have already been taken, if you will. So what happens if they do a traffic study and find out that the others are going over, or that this one will put it over 200? If these 2 lots are within the designated 25 each, what if that puts the entire subdivision over 200? What do you do then? So do you have a traffic study for the whole subdivision?
Is it
Yep.
200 trips per day or 200 trips per
It's
hour?
per hour.
Hour.
Per hour, so I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And when was this determined? Was this determined 1993 when that was?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's another issue.
bound by that?
So
It's odd.
I think it's an odd condition, and that's why we said, we want to look at it a little internally. I mean, originally, we thought the applicant could, but I think we probably are better positioned with the data. Industrial uses are generally lower traffic generators than commercial and residential. But so what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the building sizes and what are developed, like what kind of uses are developed. We'll use the IT to do some chip generation, and we'll let the board know how that pans out. To your point, though, if right now the subdivision appears, if we do conservative estimates and it appears to be 175 trips, based on their chip generation, they're still under, they're way under what would be allocated if we did it evenly.
Okay.
So I think we want to look at it and be cognizant of what's going on, just to be true to that subdivision condition, but I don't know that we should be that concerned yet. Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, great.
And these are the last two lots in the subdivision, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if there was a concern, then I think we'd want to go out and maybe just look at what's the traffic like on this road. Do we think that an additional 14 trips an hour is gonna do something?
And just one more thing, and before I get to that, before I forget, I want to commend Dan on a great report, but not only the content, but the presentation tonight was excellent. Thank you. So, I visited the property, I visited the subdivision, I drove into each one of the other double lots. So 3 driveways, basically. And it's such a mess. It's so disorganized. There's stuff all over the place, cars parked on the road. There was this huge sort of greenhouse type of structure on the side of one of the buildings. There were pallets piled all over it was just one great mess. And it's funny that, we're talking about these items like the tandem parking problem and the aisle for the truck. When I went into each one, it took me several maneuvers to make a U-turn to get out because it was so constrained. And so I just bring that up because I don't know what to do about that. That's more of like, I guess it's an enforcement topic. It doesn't really pertain to what we're talking about here today, what we're reviewing. But I think it was such a mess that I did want to bring it up, and just for the record.
Okay, thanks, Lou. What are your feelings on the Phase 1A archaeological?
Yeah, that's right. That was the other. I never really thought that much about that because from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, there's been a study already done for the subdivision and it didn't really require any further review.
Is that right?
That's the way I understood it.
I didn't have a record of a phase 1.
Oh, okay. And I misread what you said in the memo. Didn't you say the planning department wasn't?
Yeah, I originally said we weren't gonna recommend it, but because it wasn't required for other sites in the subdivision, then we kind of revised that language mostly just you wanna.
Yeah, so to screen whether or not a phase 1 archaeological site investigation is necessary, we really do look at 2 things. Is it in a buffer zone and has the site ever been developed before? And if the answer to first question is yes, second question is no, then we typically recommend it. Now, just because one has not been historically done, conditions have changed since then because there's this new sensitivity that's been recognized on the CRIS system with that Wayne Scott resource survey. So, it was contemporaneous with the last approval. Who knows if it happened before or after they didn't catch it, but now that that's there, that's another kind of indication of it being appropriate. So, we didn't see that any was conducted. Changes in circumstances seem to have occurred, and as a planner, I'd always recommend it in this case.
Well, then I would go by your advice on that.
Okay. All right, good.
Why are you laughing?
Oh, no, sorry, I wasn't.
So I'd actually like to hear from everybody around the table on this one. Reed, we'll start at your end of the table.
Yeah, I thought both Dan and Lou gave a very good report. I think the applicant, these are relatively minor issues, and I support the applications. I'm a little confused because maybe I read it wrong. I thought the memo had mentioned that a dig was not recommended, but at least one of the questions maybe?
It did.
We did change that.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did?
Sorry about that.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, I wanted to revise it sooner, but.
okay. Nothing to add.
Okay, thanks, Reed. Bruce?
Yeah, no, I think I support it as well. I guess the only question I have is the easement for the LIPA. Is that something that can be adjusted? I mean, is the pad already there? Is that's sort of,
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
if we can adjust it, then I think we can adjust the driveway and.
I think it's a good idea to adjust the driveway so that it's in
Yeah,
more of a straight
absolutely.
line, but we need to find out if there are any utilities under that utility easement that need to access it. So I think that's a question, it's a pending question.
Yeah, one of the questions we'll address, whether you want to get information about that. Okay.
Bruce, you stole my thunder. I was gonna ask, can that be moved? Can that pad mount be moved to straighten the driveway out? So I want to just mention that there's a whole list of uses from the 1993 Turnpike Commercial Center, permissible uses. And 13.24, I would recommend taking a look at it. Selling it?
The only thing I'll add too is they later revised that to also include service commercial in 1997. It should be, I believe it was attached to the, but yes, those were all still.
Long memos.
I know. A lot of documents.
Okay, we're thorough.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jen?
I agree with just about everything. I think that, it's a fairly standard application. I have to say, I don't think I do agree with the archaeological survey. I think that because it hasn't been required of any of the other lots, it kind of puts a big, like an undue burden on this particular applicant.
I agree with you, Jim.
Eva?
Yeah, I agree with the application. Again, some minor changes, and I'd have to third in agreement with Jen. As we stated, these are the last two lots in the subdivision. And this was never a requirement, and while it is a change in circumstances, I think it's kind of, that ship has sailed.
So I think I mostly agree with Lou, actually, in his assessment of the brush. But I do think, one thing that occurs to me is that, there's so little margin for error here, right? This is so tight, right? If you want to add a pad for a dumpster somewhere, you're out of coverage here, right? So I'm just pointing that out that, we're always a little bit wary when we're pushed right up against the limit, but you are below it. This is your decision to make, but it's a little uncomfortable for me to put 7,000 square foot buildings on this site and leave no room for error. It could certainly help the parking situation too and avoid tandem if you decided to, in your client's wisdom, to reduce all this. So that's my soapbox about that. And I do feel, we're kind of in a mode right now where sensitivity to archaeological, to things like doing archaeological digs has changed over the last couple of years. There's been sort of a really shift in our thinking about it, and we're doing it. It is our precedent now to require when the conditions that Tina mentioned are present, and they are. So I would support that. All right, so with that, we'll go to the questions and we'll see where that leaves us.
I want to just add two things, Ed, just to pick up on what you just said regarding the tightness of the site, and Dan's memo really got to it. A lot of the dimensions and like turning radius information wasn't provided in the plans. So, we're going to be looking at that very closely when it comes back, because it's tight. So if that doesn't work, the applicant is, after the next review, gonna have to do more revisions. So I would just encourage the applicant, if it looks like stuff is not working, make those revisions now to help you through the process, because that will be a focus the next conversation. And then on the archaeology, I just want to remind the board that as secret lead agency, you'll have to make a decision that there's no potential significant adverse impacts to archaeological information. So, rather than basing it on precedent, the standard that you're looking for is that there's no environmental impact. So if you feel like you can make that decision based on what you have for this project, that's, I think, what you have to look at, as opposed to what was done in the past.
When you say no environmental impact on what exactly, like how?
Archaeological resources, like say that there's a old midden pile here with valuable information on how Native Americans lived in the area. And during the construction, it could be destroyed. I'm totally making that up, but those are the types of things that are found when archaeological studies are done. So, that I just want to remind everybody of the obligations under the state law.
Right, with this application, and the fact that we don't know, right?
Right, you'd have to, even
Points
though
us
you
in
don't
a
have
certain
data,
direction.
you'd have to make the statement that there's no impact, and you'd have to base it on something.
Yeah, gotcha. All right.
How
so
does this site and buildings relate to the other two size-wise? Are the other 4 buildings close in coverage percentages as this one, or is this one bigger? Is this one smaller? How's that sort of?
Yeah, I can look, I don't know the coverages off the top of my head. The only one I do know though is for the lot 5, which this one. And it looks almost like the adjacent site is the same more. The buildings are fairly similar in size. This one's exactly the same, and I believe these are very similar. So it is pretty consistent with the area. The coverage is the question, I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
Okay, we'll go to the questions. Should the applicant review the comments issued during the preliminary review of this application and respond to each comment in a revised set of plans accordingly? Yes. Should the applicant review the conditions of a Turnpike Commercial Center subdivision and ensure that the proposed project complies with these requirements? Yes. Does the planning board agree with the planning department that the proposed use should be classified as multiple industrial complex, and that the applicant should comply with the appropriate special permit standards? Yes. Does the planning board agree with the planning department that the revised planning board groundwater protection policy standards be met for the building and site design? Yes, definitely.
Questions.
Does the planning board agree that the applicant should be considered for a parking waiver pending the additional information requested? Yeah.
Parking
Are we-
waiver, is that for the tandem?
That was the yeah, you guys,
Setbacks.
yeah, wait, so you guys could also not, what's it called? Not opine on that tonight, it's not.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're good with that, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Should the applicant provide additional information with respect to the proposed parking areas, including information pertaining to the adequacy of the proposed number of spaces? 14, clarifying how the tandem parking spaces are anticipated to operate and whether alternative arrangements are being considered at this time. I'd say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does the planning board find the proposed site access and common driveway configuration to be acceptable, or should alternative arrangements be provided as indicated by the planning department and town consulting engineer? Alternatives. Yeah. Related to that, should a copy of the LIPA easement be submitted to the board and clarification of the proposed structures within the easement? Yes, definitely. Does the planning board agree with the planning department that the traffic generation report be revised to acknowledge the existing uses within the subdivision and assess whether the anticipated trip generation will result in the subdivision exceeding the maximum threshold of 200 trips per hour?
So,
You've done a lot of this work.
yeah, I was gonna say, we could,
They're gonna do their own.
we would revise this one.
Yeah, we're gonna do that.
We're gonna do that part instead, yeah.
All right.
For the planning department.
Okay, all right. So I guess that's a yes. Right, okay. I'm not that concerned about it. Should the applicant submit a comprehensive landscaping plan consisting of natural vegetation for the subject property, including heavy evergreen screening around the pad mount transformer near the common driveway entrance? Yeah, yes.
If I, for number, I was just saying really quick, number 11 and 13 have to be revised too. So 11 is about the proposed lighting. We originally were unclear about it and said it might be one to discuss with council, but really it should read the planning board is accepting of the light spill as currently shown, or should it be revised to not light spill for number 11?
Say it again, Dan?
Sorry, yeah, it's like, does the planning board find the proposed light spill over the southern property line to be acceptable, or should the plans be revised to permit no light spill?
Okay.
And that would be number 11.
Okay, all right, so, yeah. Do you have a comment about that?
I just want to, yeah, I get kind of a comment and question all at once.
Just, if you could just for the record, your name and address.
Bill Kelly with Morton Buildings, authorized agent for the applicant. On the light spill that's shown is spilling onto the parking lot for lot 4.
Yeah.
So you have light 2 spilling on 4, lot 4 spilling on 5. So to me, that's irrelevant. Because
Right, well, and Dan did note that, and we're about to either agree with you or not, right?
I'm trying to convince you to agree with me.
All right, so the revised question is basically, how do we feel that the light spill is an issue, lot to lot? No.
You convinced us.
Yeah. There you go. Nice job.
I was going to go the other way until I.
Yeah, that was good. Thank God you're here. Does the planning board wish to require that the mounting height of each light fixture be lowered to mitigate potential light spill and ensure conformance with the town code?
You always want to conform with the town code.
So this one, yeah, I'll clarify this one because I should have touched upon this in my analysis. We did indicate that the mountain height, I think they're currently proposed at 12 feet. Now, there's no specific regulation in the town code regarding that mountain height, rather than just be appropriate and not exceed 12 feet. There was a planning board kind of guidelines about the lumen levels and whether or not the appropriate mountain height for different lumen levels. So basically what they proposed, an appropriate mountain height could be 10 feet. It's something we wrote in the memo and it could help mitigate the potential light spill, but some of the board just may want to consider. It's not something that's, again, really hard and set in stone.
Right, so basically it's in relationship to the other question, right?
Yeah.
If we don't feel it's an issue, we don't need to lower them. Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And for number 13, and apologies for all the revisions, this one should rather read, does the planning board wish to require phase 1A archaeological investigation be conducted, rather than does it agree with the plan, our previous recommendation on this?
I think there should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, just because we want to revise that statement.
Because so as an analogy, if sanitary systems requirements change, there was a change of circumstance, a change of requirement. Just because everyone else didn't do it or didn't have to do it doesn't mean that it's not important that this particular applicant do it. So that's how I feel about it.
The regulations have been revised since that time, right?
Well, I think the area has been designated as potentially sensitive since then,
Say it again, Dana.
The area is designated as potentially sensitive now because of some new information that was submitted to the state. So it's just information that's available that may not have been available to those decision makers, but is available now.
Right, exactly. And I think
that information.
Excuse me?
What is that information that's?
So there's a Wayne Scott resource inventory. It was used to designate some areas as sensitive on the cultural resources information system.
Yeah.
And the state is the entity that identifies the buffer zones, and they do it based on proximity to other known locations that have been confirmed with resources. So it's a buffer. It's not always, you're not always going to find something. Most often, a lot you don't, sometimes you do. But again, you as lead agency, you'd have to decide no impact.
right. So we would have to really be certain at this point that there's no impact, and we don't have the information to really be able to say that with confidence. So do we agree that we have to do the phase 1 and archaeological investigation? No.
I think we have no choice.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
Have to.
Yes.
We have to?
Yes.
I think we have
Yes,
to.
we have to.
for some of us. But,
We can note that you're abstaining from answering that question, but we do. We're obliged to do that. Should the applicant respond to the comments of the town consulting engineer per the memo dated February 25th, 2025?
Yes.
Yes. And finally, does the planning board agree with the planning department's assessment of additional information that must be provided per town code 255-6-50, necessary elements of a site plan? Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Kelly, that should give you a good two birds with one stone, 2 and 4, all done. It's all here. You'll get a memo. Good, thank you very much.
Do you want to just do Franzetti really quick because it's like it's a 10-minute conversation or?
Yeah,
Yep.
your attorney's not here. Oh, he is. Oh, there he is. The extra attorney who came in. Okay, great. So let's do that. We'll take that up. It's going to be a quick conversation.
I've lost it.
Let's see. Yeah, I know I'm out of order today.
Me too.
Okay, so this is the Franzetti sub-waiver review. Dan, you're on again for this. And Jen, this is yours, right? The applicant is here, as I see, and we'll start with Dan's analysis.
Okay, thank you. Start with this. There we go. Okay. Probably keep this one relatively quick. So just as a reminder of board, so this is an application to subdivide the original parcel shown here, 25 Talkhouse Lane, into 2 individual lots. One of which is about 28,000 square feet in size, the other which is about 25,000 square feet in size. The property itself is in a unique circumstance that is actually split between the A residence and B residence zoning district. And when you refer to the plans, this is actually where it's being proposed. The subdivision line is proposed directly across. This lot was originally created as part of the Seascape Garden subdivision. It was originally subdivided as currently configured and referred to lots 4 and 5 within that project. However, the property was rezoned to its current designation in 1972, and the lots were subsequently merged under common ownership, I believe, in the 1990s. Both lots are considered 100% clear, naturally occurring vegetation, and the neighboring lots around it are all residential properties. So in terms of remaining discussion, there's only a few property points to really discuss at this point. First of all, with respect to SECRA, so this is an unlisted action pursuant to SECRA in Chapter 128 of the Town Code. A surety EF form Part 1 was included in the original submission of this application. However, we did note that the mapper required by New York State's DEC mapper wasn't included. Just to help move things along, this is something that we did actually amend and add to the application for the board's review and the applicant's consideration. However, we did have several comments for revisions that were needed for the EF Part 1 format at this time. Those are all listed throughout the memo, and I'm happy to answer any questions on them ultimately. But as a reminder for the board, the planning board did declare lead agency status during the application's initial review. So we're recommending that once the acceptable EF Part 1 is submitted, the planning board conduct their coordinated review of the application. And the agencies to refer to and coordinated with include Suffolk County Department of Health Services and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, going back actually to the zoning board, so as we've indicated throughout a lot of reviews of this application, several variances were required in order to permit the subdivision as currently configured. One of them is a lot area variance for this northern lot. Again, as a reminder, lot 1 is located within the A residence zone district, which has a minimum lot area of 40,000 square feet. The map itself has it currently at 28,263 square feet. So lot area variance was required to create that lot as currently configured. The second variance was a side yard setback variance for the existing solar panels, so that they could remain 9.2 feet away from the property line, where a minimum setback of 10 feet is required. It's a 0.8 setback. So the ZBA, this ultimately went in front of the ZBA in September of 2024. And the resolution is attached of them agreeing to grant the necessary variances for the subway as currently configured. One thing that's important to note is the map that the ZBA reviewed is consistent with the map currently submitted in the planning board's files, which does remain unchanged with the original review of this application. Recognizing that the applicants have received necessary variances for this application, the planning board can now proceed with their decision-making process. In this decision-making, though, we do recommend the board just take once again, reaffirm their acceptingness of the current layout as currently configured. We've attached a bunch of standards that are typically considered for subwaivers as part of this application form, which include comments about the property lines, the allocation of open spaces, building envelopes, and configuration of lot lines. Those are all there for the board's review, and one of the comments tonight is just reaffirming that they're accepting of it as currently presented. So in terms of additional comments beyond that, the only other comment we really had to do with the access itself. So as we know during preliminary review, previous reviews, there is 2 access points proposed, one driveway that's currently existing for the proposed lot 2, and a new proposed access easement to serve lot 1, which is kind of located in the middle of both proposed property lines. So although we typically it is a general practice of the planning board to require common driveways. We do, in lieu of separate driveways, we do know that this portion of Talkhouse Lane does experience relatively low levels of traffic, and the surrounding lots all appear to have individual driveways. Therefore, we recommend that we don't really have an issue with these site access currently proposed. However, planning board should opine whether or not they agree with that or digital arrangements. If the planning board is accepting of the proposed access, ultimately an access utility easement saying for the rights of access for proposed lot 1 in a form sent to the planning board attorney would be needed to be recorded as approved in a subdivision. This, as we've indicated, should also allow for the location of utilities, which should be placed below ground. And as per the town code, ultimately the name on the survey should be revised to just indicate access to utility easement. And we're recommending, given how far along this is, that this should be required as a condition of approval. Aside of that, the fire marshal's office reviewed the plans back in August 3rd, 2023. Determined the information is sufficient, not relevant, necessitate further review for fire protection purposes. And ultimately, I guess in conclusion, obviously the applicants have received the necessary variances. As per the subway is currently configured, and our real decision point tonight is the planning board reaffirming whether they are accepting the pro subway design at this time, or if there's additional information needed. Ultimately, if the planning board is accepting of the sub-waiver, the only thing we recommend the application is complete pending seeker review and a tiny minor edit for the access to utilities. That's everything.
Good, thank you very much, Dan. Does the applicant wish to be heard before we have our conversation?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. Richard Whalen from Whalen Fowler, PLLC, here on behalf of Nora Franzetti, who is the applicant and is in the audience tonight. From those of you who go back to when this was last before the planning board, this is an application to create a lot which Nora's daughter, Megan, and her son, Nora's son-in-law and their children will use to build a house. So as soon as this subdivision is approved, Megan and her husband are going to get a permit to build a modular house on lot 1. They are local Montauk residents. Obviously, Megan was born and raised in Montauk, and they have 2 kids now? 2 kids now, okay. Changed since the original application, we had 1. And they both work in Montauk. So it's really an affordable housing thing. That is what we told the zoning board, and it's true. So that's what this is all about, really. The items raised in the memo, I think there are really 3 things I would address. First of all, we certainly will amend the EAF to use the mapper. The only problem is the statement in question 13 is incorrect. There are no wetlands on the subject property or on any properties directly abutting this property. The EC is wrong. So you want me to answer that incorrectly, or do you want me to answer that in accordance with the DEC's EAF?
Question in the EAF?
Yeah, it's on the second page.
Second page. Question.
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
There are no wetlands on adjoining properties.
So, do you want me to answer? The way it's appropriately done is to attach the EAF mapper. If you want to annotate that you've surveyed the area and the information's incorrect, that's how you handle it. And then in the negative declaration, we'll obviously vet that and determine whether or not there's any impacts to wetlands, which obviously there's none on the property, but it's just this is the procedure. You know, you use the mapper. If it's wrong, you put it in there, and then all the information in the file is what it should be.
Thank you. As long as I can annotate it. 'Cause
Yes.
I don't want to say something that's not true. Also on SEQA, the planning board had not done, even though the planning board was the lead agency, the planning board had not done its SEQA review before the zoning board acted. So when the zoning board finished their public hearing and they went and looked at the file, they said, oops, nobody's done SEQA yet. So the zoning board did uncoordinated review. So the memo here talks about doing coordinated review involving the planning board, the health department, and the ZBA. The ZBA already made a SEQA determination. Otherwise, they could not have rendered a decision. You still have to do SEQA, but the only agency you're now coordinating with is the health department.
We'll still send it to ZBA.
Okay, but they've already made
acted.
they've already made a SEQA determination. Otherwise, we would not be here tonight.
Yep.
And the only other thing is the access and utility easement. Happy to change the map to say access utilities, but I will point out the planning board has now been reviewing subdivisions for approximately 72 years, and access easement has traditionally meant driveway to get to a lot along with any associated utilities. And obviously any easement that I draft will include the right to the placement of utilities. So, if you want us to change it on the map, I'll do that. But traditionally we have used the term access easement broadly to include both physical or vehicular access as well as utility access. Okay.
I think we'll like to see them distinguished now. That's our new thing. But okay, thank you very much. Please.
Thanks, Dan, for the thorough, and thank you also for the even more thorough pointing out of all that. So I think this is, as the planning department says, this is fairly simple. I support the application. I think with the few changes, we submitting the EAF and us declaring lead agency and doing SEQA, I think we're good.
Anyone else have comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I support this 100%. I kind of share your story as well. My little bit of my concern is, can I cut my lot in half and build a house for my kids and have it 2 separate lots?
Wasn't it 2 lots to begin with?
2 separate lots
Yeah.
in the original subdivision. And
So I think one of the reasons that this did get an easier kind of threshold for review is that this used to be 2 lots. And it is in a split zone, so they created 1 compliant lot. There's only 1 lot that needs the variance. So, but to the answer to your question, I think is no. I don't think that in general, if somebody came in here and said, I want to make 2 lots that are not zoning compliant, I don't think that would sail through the review process.
How similar would the applicant have to be to this?
Well, again, this was this was separate lots. They were combined at one time in history. I'm not sure why. And they're split zoned.
But they were combined. I mean,
Yeah,
you can't ignore that.
Yeah.
So we're dividing it again.
Yeah, so, I would just say, yes, I think that this does have some precedent setting. I don't have the zoning board determination with me to read through why they decided to approve it. But they did, do we have it attached to the?
It's in the folder.
So it's in the folder if we want to read that, but I know that the past history was a good amount to do with it.
Yeah.
I support this. I support this.
In regard to your question, Michael, the reason the lots were combined is because back in the 80s, or was it 90s? Nora wanted to put the barn on the vacant northern lot. And at that time, you couldn't put an accessory building on an adjoining lot without a variance. Today, you'd be able to do that because the lots are in the same name. You wouldn't have had to combine the lots to build the barn. The only reason they were combined was to allow the barn to go on the adjoining property, and she didn't want to go for variance.
Yeah, again, I support it. I support this.
All right, thanks very much. I think we're ready for the questions, right? Should the applicant revise the short form environmental assessment form as indicated by the planning department and prepare it utilizing New York State Department of Environmental Conservation mapper? Yep, we already agreed, and you're going to annotate it, Mr. Whalen. Does the planning board wish to declare lead agency status and initiate a coordinated review, let's call it, with involved agencies? Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Does the planning board find the proposed access as currently configured to be acceptable?
Yes.
Yeah. If the planning board finds the proposed access acceptable, should the applicant update the map to include an access and utility easement as opposed to an access easement along the boundary between the lots 1 and 2? As a condition of final approval, I would say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, yes. It's our thing. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. So what?
So private.
Oh, yes, exactly. So, thank you. Our next site plan review is for the Surf Rider Restaurant. Okay, great. And let's see. All right, so this is the debut of one of our newer members, Ava, is going to lead the discussion for the board. So, Will, this is your application. Take it away.
All right, this is an application for a proposed restaurant with shed decks and parking on the corner of Montauk Highway and South Emery Street in Montauk. Currently, the site consists of 2 separate properties which are proposed to be merged, and when combined, the property will be 22,138 square feet in size. The sites are located in the Central Business Zoning District and considered to be 100% clear of natural vegetation. Currently, the sites are improved with a cottage with deck, sheds, bocce court, wood fencing, pool patio, and concrete swimming pool, which are accessory to the Sands Hotel located directly to the south. These are the subject lots, and this is the Sands Hotel. So they are right next to each other. The project is an unlisted action pursuant to SECRA, and the applicant should prepare a short environmental assessment form. Once the SEAF is submitted, the planning department recommends the planning board request lead agency status. The proposed restaurant use is permitted within the commercial business zoning district. In the submitted floor plans, 2 bars are shown without seating, and the applicant should confirm if they will have seating, and if so, if they are accessory to the restaurant use. Here you can see on the first floor, here's a bar with no seats. And on the second floor, the roof area, this is another bar with no seats shown. In addition, the applicant should provide the estimated hours of operation for the site. The existing pool is to remain, and the applicant should ensure it remains compliant with Suffolk County pool requirements for safety. All proposed structures appear to be dimensionally conformant, and the proposed improvements appear to comply with building and total lot coverage maximums. The town code lists the number of parking spaces required for a restaurant as 1 per 3 permanent seats, or 1 per each 3 persons of rated capacity, plus 1 per employee per shift. 16 indoor seats and 26 outdoor seats for the site are proposed, which would result in 14 parking spaces required for patrons, while the plans indicate 21 proposed parking spaces. The applicant should confirm the number of employees per shift expected to calculate the parking requirements. The site plan indicates the proposed parking spaces will be compliant with town code requirements. However, the applicant should expand the drive aisle to comply with town code. The existing eastern parking area, over here on South Emery Street, contains 7 parking spaces which extend into the right-of-way of South Emery Street. The applicant should adjust these parking spaces to be fully located within the property and provide the dimensions of them. Additionally, the applicant should submit drainage calculations and drainage structures for the parking areas, as none have been provided. The site is currently and will continue to be served by the Suffolk County Water Authority. The septic site plan lacks details typically provided, including profile drawings, and the applicant should provide these for review. The sanitary flow calculations provided also lack detail and do not match the proposed number of seats provided elsewhere in the plans. The sanitary calculations appear to use the calculation for an outdoor or seasonal bar for some seating, and the applicant should clarify if the second floor outdoor seating is intended to be used as a seasonal bar. If the sanitary calculations counted the seats on the second level as restaurant seats, the site would exceed its maximum flow limit. No details regarding stormwater were submitted, and the applicant should provide those for review. The lighting plan shows spill over property lines, with the greatest areas of spill on South Emory Street and Montauk Highway. Planning board policy requires site lighting not to spill outside of property lines, but if the board determines the spill is minimal, it may choose to permit such lighting. The planning department recommends the applicant eliminate light spill. The submitted fixture specification sheets indicate the chosen fixtures may emit temperatures greater than 3,000 lumens, which is not permitted, and the applicant should confirm the lighting temperatures. No landscape plan was submitted for the site, and the applicant should clarify the landscaping plan. In conclusion, the applicant should clarify the proposed finished floor elevations and ground elevations at each building and structure, provide the floor areas for each floor of the proposed buildings, provide dimensions between the proposed buildings and structures, and submit a revised site plan depicting the circulation pattern, drainage structures, and drainage calculations. The applicant should minimize light spill outside of property lines, confirm lighting fixtures will not exceed 3,000 degrees Kelvin, submit septic system profiles, calculations, and design details, and provide the materials of the proposed structures. The applicant should submit a short environmental assessment form, confirm the restaurant and bar seating, clarify the number of employees expected per shift, expand the proposed drive aisle in the western parking area, relocate the existing parking spaces within the property lines, and provide parking space dimensions for the eastern parking area. Upon receipt of these items, the plans will be reviewed by the town consulting engineer. And additional approvals for this project will be required from the ARB, the Office of Fire Prevention, New York State Department of Transportation, and Suffolk County Department of Health Services.
Okay, thanks very much, Will. Does the applicant wish to be heard? That's a surprise. Hey, Richard.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman and members of the planning board. Richard Whalen from Whalen Fowler PLLC. I will not be speaking alone, okay? Marlene Dominguez, who is a principal in the companies that own the business, is here tonight, and also Lori Wiltshire from Land Planning Services, who submitted the application. So either or both of them will have comments on some of this. So just brief overview from me. It's a very small proposed restaurant, 16 indoor seats, 26 outdoor seats on a site that already contains a swimming pool. The swimming pool will continue to be used as it has since I think the 1960s or so, or earlier, for the motel, which is on the other side of the alley facing South Emerson Street. Fairly straightforward application. Will has summarized everything for you very well. We know we have additional information to provide you. The one thing I did want to point out, because it's not in the memo, the basement, there is a proposed basement, it is on the plans. That basement would extend into the groundwater table. In December, the town board amended the zoning code to now require, as a matter of a code requirement, that the bottom of any building now, with certain exceptions like footings and so forth, has to meet a two-foot separation to groundwater. So we would have two choices, basically. Either we seek a variance from that requirement, or we raise the building up. Currently, the second floor, I think even the parapet is only at like 17 feet above grade. So, I'm sure you'll comment on that. And, obviously we'll have to deal with that now that that's not a code requirement. So.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you have questions, I think some of them, either Marley or Lori will probably answer them, but shoot it at me and we'll see who answers.
On that issue of the basement, I know that property is in an area that floods a lot.
I don't think we're in a flood zone. I don't think this property is in the flood zone. what we call as being in the flood zone.
No, it's actually in the lowest rating, which I was surprised.
If you're going to speak, you need to come forward. And just identify yourself for the record, please.
My name's Marley Dominguez. I'm a principal at the ownership firm. This site, the restaurant's actually even higher than the hotel, and it's one flood zone risk level, lower risk than the hotel. It's actually, this particular area is one of the lower risk areas. I believe it was the 500-year zone, if I remember correctly.
I'm just gonna put in, I think there's localized flooding on South Emmerdry, like, for stormwater, during heavy rains. So, that's one of the reasons we asked a bunch of questions on drainage. There's no sanitary profile, so we are not gonna try to engineer where it is, but the sanitary system looks like you might have issues as well, so that's why we are asking for that info, because I don't think the hotel to the south, and we talked with you guys about this when they came in to talk about that location. There's no drainage there. I don't think there's any drainage on this site now. So, well, definitely something that's going to be looked at future.
Bathrooms are located in the basement.
Yeah, I saw that on the plans. I would double check that. I'm not saying off the top of my head, but usually south of Montauk Highway in the village of Montauk is a flood zone A, which would be a special flood hazard zone. Oceanfront would be a V. A would be better, certainly, but I would double check that for compliance and sanitary, especially with, I saw the bathrooms down there.
Okay.
So we'll definitely double check, but as part of the reviews, we do check that, and it does look like it's the 500 year, but we'll double check because that's what we had in our GIS, but let's just make sure we look at that because I know what you're saying is true. Yeah.
It's actually on your survey.
It's in it.
I'm sure.
But I don't know, you think that's relevant. The flood zones change all the time. I mean, they're being constantly remapped. It's remapped every 10 years. This is something Ava and I know quite well. I think that area is,
Yeah.
Yeah, so X is not a flood zone area. You don't have to realize a base flood elevation above what it is.
But does it?
All right, before we continue, just to say, so the applicant at this moment has the floor, right, to provide their comments before we start our discussion. So before we jump in.
Yes.
Do you have other comments that you want to make at this stage of the game? You were just responding.
Responding to the flood zone.
Okay, all right, that's good, that's great.
There's some other question I can answer if that helps. Or some of the other questions I know were around the bar. Will there be bar seats? And the answer is no. It is a very small structure. We have very little storage. So that bar is an area where we're storing a lot of the products, refrigeration, things like that. It's not meant to be a walk-up bar. If you look, the main dining area is right against it. There's no space for people to circulate around there. It's really tight as is. We want that to actually, the dining area is already small as is. We want that to remain a dining area. And that is not like a congregating, nor will it ever be a congregating area like you would see at like a more traditional bar. This is more storage as much as anything, and aesthetic. We want it to look nice, of course, but to answer the question, no, there will not be stools there at any point, not even seasonal.
Okay.
It is a dining area.
All right, we may have more questions for you about that as we go along. So good. So Ava's going to lead our conversation on this side of the table.
Thank you, Will, again for your memo, and thank you everyone for commenting on the application. Mainly my questions were around the seating, which you reconfirmed, to point really to all the other questions pertaining to sanitary and parking. I think we do need the employee count to, confirm the configuration of the final parking requirements. And furthermore, to go on to, the lighting, I think the light spill over into Montauk Highway obviously is not going to be, should not be permitted as per town code. And back to the parking on that eastern side, to reconfigure that parking so it doesn't go over into the street area. And, you know, the landscaping plan, the items that Will brought up in his memo, obviously you said that you would comply with. That's pretty much what I have thus far. Anyone want to add comment?
Yeah, I think we should hear from everybody on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started talking about the basement, the flood zone, the flooding, density of the area. I think that's going to be an issue. So whether, if they're going to raise the building, we're going to have to take a hard look at that, how that conforms with the look of downtown. The other question I had was the alleyway. Who owns the alleyway?
The alleyway is probably owned by 511 Equities, which is a dissolved corporation.
Who?
511 Equities, it was the successor to Montauk Beach Company, all of those. Most of the alleys in downtown Montauk were turned over to the town in, I think, the 1970s or 1980s. I'm gonna say Andy might even know, but for some reason, the alleyways in this block were never deeded to the town. So I presume that they're still owned by 511, and 511 was dissolved about 20 years ago.
So I can lay claim to that alleyway?
Well, we don't lay claim to it, but we have the right to use it as a property owner abutting it. We have the right to the use of it, but we're not, I don't think we're proposing to build anything in the alleyway.
You mentioned that the Sands Hotel, the previous iteration of this property, they used the pool for the hotel use. So the hotel guests would walk across the alleyway.
Yeah.
Go to the pool.
Yeah. And that's how it has been for decades.
That's all I asked to know.
Just back to the flood zone, I think maybe we're all confusing like the colloquial term for flooding as opposed to an official flood zone. I mean, downtown Montauk floods, all the time. So I do think that for me, that is a big concern that the basement, the bathrooms are in the basement and that it's less than 2 feet to groundwater. The maximum height is 30 feet, right? So this is only 17 feet. I do think it could probably be reconfigured a little bit to adjust for that. Because you also, as an owner, you don't want to deal with like the flooding and the septic problems and, all of that. It's just, I have a question. So the pool, what are you doing with the pool area now? Is that?
So for the pool for this summer, we're changing nothing essentially. We're changing the decking. The concrete was really kind of quite worn. That's it. And we're upgrading the mechanical course of it to make sure it functions more properly. Aside from that, we're not doing anything this summer. For next year, we're just increasing the size of the deck space a little bit. You can see to the right of the image. That's kind of like a wellness deck, and it's also going to be like a movie theater essentially for the public. And that's it on the deck. As far as the basement goes, I would be very curious to get everyone's opinion on that. I just learned about the change in the code a week ago, so we kind of scrambled real quick to look at what that would look like from a change perspective. For one, we can absolutely move the building up to be above the groundwater. Just by background, my first job at 22 was a 5-story subterranean parking garage on the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. So for me, this seems like more simple. I was in over my head 20 years ago, but yeah, well, absolutely, we can certainly change that to make it 2 feet above groundwater. We looked at that, and if we kind of if you imagine just sliding the building up, we'd be at 27 feet, which is still 10 feet roughly, or 8 feet lower than the hotel.
3 feet lower. It's
3 feet lower than code, but 8 feet lower than the hotel. So it's still kind of a step down, just for reference point. Because I think the peak is 35 feet of
Flat roof, 30 feet.
No, I'm building 2.
Hotel?
Yeah, I think it's 30. I think it's 35. But don't quote me there, but I think that's what it is. So yeah, we can just shift that up essentially. But I think the way they would do with the groundwater, and again, this is where I'm curious your opinion. I'm thinking out loud here a little bit, but we would probably have maybe a step or two down on that ground floor level, which would still be a couple feet at least above groundwater. And then that lowers the overall height of the building a little bit. So we're still have some flexibility below the few feet below. And we're kind of solving both issues on the top and the bottom, I guess you could say.
Okay.
So that's what we're sketching right now, essentially.
Thank you. I think that's really all my question, I think, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Michael?
My question is about the eastern parking lot. Is that parking space for the hotel or for the restaurant?
No, it's for the restaurant, it's property. Yeah, this property.
Say it again?
Well, for this property, that parking is going to be designated for this property, not for the hotel.
Okay. How you gonna enforce that?
Probably because it'll be used by the people at the restaurant and then it won't be available.
Be a sign that says for restaurant parking only kind of
We
thing?
could do that. You want us to do something like that, I could do that.
Well, I just imagine anyone in the area, because parking is such a premium, would want to just park there and go to many other.
Well, we're probably gonna have to slide it forward, so it'll be on our property. I mean, as indicated, we're about, looks like about 3 feet of it is in the right of way of South Emory. So once it's on our property, it's our parking, we can control it.
So another question unrelated to that. So if I'm at the restaurant and I want to take my gin and tonic to the pool deck, can I walk out to the pool deck?
I've no idea.
I thought it was blocked off. Isn't there a wall there?
Oh, sorry, to walk into the pool?
Yeah.
Oh,
From the restaurant.
yeah, this is very important to us. I mean, we're hotel owners first. The pool will have a fence around it and it will be for hotel guests only. So you will need a wristband or whatever it is that we decide to do to make sure that people are identified as being hotel. It is not for public use.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Since you can't go to the restaurant, have lunch, and then take a dip after.
Unless you want to be at the motel, well, you're a motel guest. You
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Bruce?
Yeah, just reiterating a couple things. Obviously, the bathrooms in the basement and the water table, that has to be addressed. I have no problem raising the building up, but obviously that's going to affect your ADA compliance. So that's just something to think about. And the seating at the bar, that was my other question. You did answer that. That may be something we might want to codify or, because you know how things sort of
Shift.
Yes. That's it. That's all I got.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Reed, any comments?
Yeah, thank you for your application. The only comment I really had, and you allayed my concerns in reference to the basement. Sounds like you're agreeable to move it 2 feet above the groundwater, so I'm fine with that. So nothing else.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, of course.
Did you think about, ever think about having a sanitary system for both this property and the hotel property? The hotel property has an antiquated system.
Yeah. I can't commit on timing, but we will have another application at some point in the not so distant future to upgrade the septic for the pool. Or for the hotel, excuse me. There's a variety of things there. The parking lot of the hotel appears that it's all gravel. It's actually all asphalt. So that's, I think a lot of people think that it's permeable. It's actually not. We'll change that to permeable. So there's a few upgrades that I think are important to the town that we'll be doing. I don't know exactly when that application will go in, but it's not like years from now. It'll be sooner than later.
So are you thinking of one unit for one septic?
No, it'll have to be separate for a variety of reasons. Yeah, different ownership structure. The lots actually, although it appears connected, they're not connected. There is an easement entirely separating
So
it.
it is a separate ownership structure then?
Technically right now, it flows up to the same ownership. It is separate entities. So, I mean, pragmatically, it's the same.
So it'll be marketed as one property, one location, one,
Well, I mean, the other thing I would say, our current intention is to hold this for a long, long time, not 5 years, not 10, but, pass it on to my children type of thing. So hopefully that never becomes an issue that comes up, but I think it's just more sound to have the flexibility of keeping them separate.
Okay, is that it? Good question. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so there's some bit of work to do here, as you know, right? And in Will's, conclusions, he outlines, what the things are we need to be looking at. And, like others, I think one of the things I'm most concerned about is this groundwater, depth to groundwater issue for the restaurant and what that actually will do to hide the building if it's, I liked the idea when I first saw it that it was sort of low. That really seemed very appropriate for the neighborhood. So it'll be interesting to see how you solve that problem, what you come back with. So we look forward to your next submission. I think you've answered most of the questions I have and addressed what the board's comments have been. So we'll go to our questions, which are: does the board agree the proposed work is an unlisted action pursuant to secret? It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Has the applicant sufficiently specified the proposed restaurant will comply with the town code definition of a restaurant? I'm not so sure. Dina?
So I just to go back to something Will touched on in the memo, the sanitary calculations didn't match the narrative for the project, right? So the sanitary calculations had the bar sanitary generation rates applied to the upstairs seating and the restaurant sanitary generation rates applied to the first level. So we were not sure. I mean, the narrative said one thing and the plan said another. So we wanted the applicant to explain what is the intended use. Maybe one of the things that we could ask for, just a revised question, is a narrative about how the site would operate, right? Because it is a bit of an atypical situation with a restaurant on the same parcel as a pool, and it's, adjoining a hotel, but there's no formal relationship there, or the ownership structure is the same, or, relationships there now might not be in the future. So I think it'd be helpful to have a narrative that kind of explain that. And a restaurant is in the code, the definitions in the memo, a entity that has its primary purpose as food service, like seated food service with drinks served with meals. So if it was like actually a bar on upstairs, that's not really a restaurant exactly. If there's but I mean, what they're describing is a little different. So I think it just needs to be crystal clear how they're going to operate so we can make sure we got the use right.
So I think we should
Just add something.
want to address that now.
Obviously, we don't, Richard Randall again. The engineer, David Rhodes, who designed the septic, is not here. He might have, and I'm not sure, but the explanation, I don't know. The health department might have a lower flow rate for outdoor dining, outdoor restaurant seats. That would be my only explanation, but we will get an explanation to you.
Okay. So I think what we're going to do is substitute this question for something more like, will the applicant provide a narrative that explains the restaurant versus bar seating situation, right? Words to that effect, right? Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the calculations.
With the calculations, with the flow calculations. Is that good, Jody? You got that? Okay. Should the applicant clarify the intention of having no seating, this is related, at the proposed bar? Yes. Right?
Yeah.
We need to know that.
Narrative, yeah.
Should the applicant specify the number of employees expected on the site per shift?
Yes.
Yes. Should the applicant expand the drive aisle in the western parking area?
Yes.
Yes. Should the applicant adjust the parking spaces in the eastern parking area to lie completely within the subject property?
Yes.
Yeah. Should the applicant provide dimensions of the parking spaces in the eastern parking area?
Yes.
Should the applicant submit septic system details, including profile drawings and calculation details?
Yes.
Yes. Should the applicant clarify why the outdoor seasonal bar calculation was used for the second floor seating? Yes, that's sort of related to the second question we came up with. Should the applicant submit drainage structure details and calculations for the parking areas?
Yes.
Yes. Should the applicant submit details regarding stormwater maintenance and drainage for review?
Yes.
Should the applicant minimize light spill outside the property lines? Yes. Yeah. Should the applicant specify the exact lighting temperature of the chosen lighting fixtures?
Yes.
Should the applicant submit a comprehensive site landscaping plan? Yes. Should the applicant provide the finished floor elevations and floor areas of the proposed structures? Yes. Yes, particularly now that it's revised. Should the applicant submit dimensions between the proposed buildings and structures? Yes. Should the applicant submit a revised plan detailing the proposed parking circulation pattern? Yes. Yes, I hadn't thought about that. Should the applicant submit the materials of the proposed structures for review? Yes. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. The time has come for 80 Firestone.
So soon?
I know, right? It's true.
We're just getting started.
Yeah, you went out for dinner and came back.
Yeah.
Good to see you. I believe Tina is pinch hitting for Brian Frank tonight. So. And Lou, this is going to be you, right, for the board? Okay.
Yeah.
Tina, it's up to you.
All right, great. Sorry, just give me a second here. I'm going to try to pull up the aerial. And everybody else using this is so much better than me. They already got it ready for me. Let me just share the screen. Hello, board members. I'm covering this application for Brian Frank. This is the application for 80 Firestone Road, Bluff Crest Cottages, located on Firestone Road in Montauk. And I have the aerial image up here. I'll just zoom out so you can see a little bit more orientation where we are, right on Fort Pond. So I will now switch back to the site plan. This is a site plan special permit modification request. The site plan special permit granted approval in 2021 to facilitate the demolition of 4 motel units with decking and construct 4 separate resort units consisting of 600 square foot, 1-story buildings, each with 662 square foot unfinished basements, patios, roof decks, and hot tubs. The approval at that time also included the construction of a staircase from the bluff crest to the shoreline. So right here's the bluff crest line, is delineated by the town. Here's the staircase. What I'm showing right now is the as-built for the application. So the application at the time had required a variance from the provisions of 255-1188, which requires resort units to be in multiple unit structures. It had required an NRSP for the staircase, and both were granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So this modification seeks to allow the as-built conditions of the properties to remain. So the applicant has described several changes that have been made to the site from the approved site plan, and those are summarized in a table in the memo. So basically, each of the units, 1A through 1D, got larger, right? From about, a little under 50 feet to 110 feet is the range of how much they were enlarged. The patios were also enlarged to a greater extent from, 300 on the lower end to 463 feet on the higher end. So according to the applicant's narrative, the increase in GFA was due to enclosing outdoor staircases. And although roof decks were originally approved on all 4 units, the only unit that has built a roof deck is unit 1A. And the applicant has said in their narrative that the remainder of the roof decks are not going to be constructed. So they should just confirm that tonight. So I'm going to just switch so the board can look at what those changes look like on the level of each unit. So these coverage comparison diagrams that I'm gonna just flip on the screen now show the increases. So the proposed is what was approved, right? Just so you understand that. And the existing is what was built. So the delta between those is how much they have been enlarged. So the language here is a little confusing. So this is with respect to coverage, and building coverage is this first one I'm showing, and then lot coverage is this second one I'm showing. The lot coverage that was approved was 9,600 square feet. They've built lot coverage 12,000, over 12,000 square feet. However, they're still below the allowable lot coverage in this zone, which is almost 16,000 square feet as shown on this survey. The planning department conducted a site visit, and it appears that the site is largely constructed at this time and that the information submitted on the survey is generally accurate. The other change from the approved plans, aside from the buildings, are a little more minor in nature. They're proposing 2 new gates. Here, the property is fronted to Firestone Road. It's not shown on this, but there's a circular type driveway arrangement proposed. So this is the ingress and here's the egress. There'll be a gate on either side. They've also proposed a series of new walkways through the site, which are not that clearly shown on the survey, but are clearly shown on the total lot coverage diagrams here. So with respect to the discussion, the planning department does not believe that these would alter the conclusions of the negative declaration that the planning board adopted in 2021. The planning board should determine if they concur with that assessment. And the planning board should also determine if any of the proposed changes would change their conditions of approval, and the applicant at that time should affirm their ability that they can still comply with the conditions of approval. Looking through them today, there's nothing here that seems inconsistent with those original conditions. There do seem to be many conditions that still remain to be met. They're not done with construction, so that's important for the applicant to note moving forward. The applicant should also confirm that there's no roof decks still planned. And, right. So the staircase has been increased in length by 2 feet. This is a relatively de minimis change, and we don't take an issue with it. The last thing I'll note is that these are, and this wasn't in the memo, but it's just a post memo note. These are resort units as classified by the town code based on their size. But the sanitary calculations for them assumed no kitchens. So, you know, if they did have kitchens, the sanitary generation rates would be greater. So just because of the size of them, we may want to consider a condition of approval that indicates that, you know, these are assumed to not have kitchens. Obviously, they'd have to go back to the health department if they wanted to add kitchens, but just as a kind of belts and suspenders there. And then, of course, the applicant should note that ARB review is also going to be required for the modified construction plans and the gates. And with that, I'll conclude my comments, or Brian's comments. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Tina, very much. Mr. Hammer, would you like to be heard? Sure.
So Tina's pinch hitting, so am I. I'm here because Joel couldn't be here tonight. We're kind of at the end of a pretty long journey. I have been involved in this at many of the points, the whole thing with the variance, attached versus detached. Very interesting story. At the end of the day, this was improved with 4 cottages. It's now improved with 4 cottages. We don't really know why the code said that, but at the end of the day, the zoning board agreed with us that they would rather have less massing and separate detached structures. I don't have a ton to add based on the memo that Brian did. I thought it was pretty good. Most of these things are as-built discrepancies. The biggest change was the enclosure of what were, staircases to access the roof decks. There was only one roof deck built on Unit 1A. The rest of them, there are no proposed roof decks. I think if you go to the site, the roof deck's kind of superfluous. I mean, it's a beautiful view. You don't need a roof deck to enhance it at anything. So, you know, the changes to the unit sizes are very small. Tina did point out correctly that, yes, the calculations include no kitchens. There's no kitchens that will be allowed in these units for that reason. I don't think any of the other changes were very substantive. They're pretty nearly identical to what's was issued when I first looked at it. You know, we did that color-coded exhibit just to kind of show, you know, draw your eye to exactly where they were. And, you know, it's not easy to pick up, but you can follow those drawings. That's why we submitted it, is just to show, hey, here's the additional coverage, a little bit different parking, walkways, et cetera. I would advise you should go take a look at the site. The re-veg is nearly, I think it's all planted right now. We're going into the growing season right now. It's going to be spectacular. There was one thing I want to reference, as Brian said, there was an unattributed letter. That's actually the way the application was submitted, as a modification form. It says attach any other sheet, so we didn't include that. So it's not a phantom letter. It was actually submitted by our office. We kind of giggled about it and spoke to Brian about it as well. Other than that, I think the memo is pretty accurate. The change to the stairway, I think they just did it based on the need to maintain that rise and run and keep it consistent, so it increased by 2 feet. That's going to be in front of the zoning board. No problem with the ARB. All the gates that you're talking about here are 4 feet or less. They're very small, but you know, it's not inclusive. It's just trying to add a measure of security for people walking up and down the street, et cetera. But I think it's also unassuming if you look at the documents. Other than that, any questions you have, happy to answer them if I can.
Great. Thanks very much. So Lou.
Yeah, so when I first looked at this, I was alarmed because I thought, you know, just calculating the numbers in terms of coverage and GFA, added GFA, it looked pretty substantial to me. And, you know, the question that popped up in my head was, how come we approved one thing and then they substantially, radically changed it? So, you know, just to give you an idea of the, you know, percentages or numbers, the buildings were approved at 600 square feet. They went to 663 square feet. Not that great, but still significant. Patios were at 578 square feet. They went to almost about average of about 1,000, so almost double. The big one was the total coverage. The approval was 9,600 square feet. They went to 12.5, which is a 30% increase. That's pretty substantial. So anyway, I had a conversation with Brian Frank about all of this, and he sort of talked me down off the ledge because he said, look, he said, yeah, it's true. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. But, you know, the changes that they made really don't have any adverse impact or create any planning issues. So, you know, I agree now that, you know, there are times to stand firm on some of these applications because it's important to do that. I think this is not one of them. I think the site is impeccably built. It's beautiful. It's certainly an asset to the area. If you have $2,000 per day to rent it. Yeah, so that's really my, you know, I was alarmed at first because I don't like it when we approve something and they go ahead and do something substantially different. But in this case, it's not a hill that I'm going to die on.
Okay. Thanks, Lou. Any other comments from anyone?
I agree.
I agree too. And I think
Okay.
Brian mentioned earlier too, that we probably would have approved this as it, you know, as it ended up being built, so.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Go ahead. Oh,
You got to talk me down, Lou. Why are the patios so much bigger? This is covering something? What, can you explain, like unit 1D goes from 578 to 1,041. That's huge. It's a huge difference. Yeah, is that right? Is that?
That's probably the one that is the largest, but I think the thinking was, the reason they built this site is they wanted to encourage the outdoor living areas. And there was a lot of discussion when we were in front of the zoning board about having the landscape, it's basically all native landscaping, and trying to encourage people to not encroach in it. So I think that was one of the reasons, is they said, hey, it's a beautiful site, these are beautiful patios, having these areas and the walkways we're proposing are going to encourage people to not leave them. You know, there's very small, you know, we minimize the clearing, there's an area in front, but that's the thinking, is that the patios were being designed to encourage people to stay within the boundaries and not encroach on some of the other landscaped areas that are in the native landscape.
Fair enough, but I still don't, I understand the narrative, but it just seems like a huge number. It just seems like.
Well, I would also point out that the total lot coverage on this property, compared to a residential property, it's probably less than a B residence lot at the end of the day. So we're not talking about huge numbers. And I don't think any of the boards, you know, we're well within our coverage limitations and outside of natural resource special permit jurisdiction on a lot of these things. Those coverages are, you know, you would compare them to other site plans. I think the board would have approved it and not worried about it's just because we're adding it at the end, and I can't speak to that. I wasn't involved in why it was done, but I do know the philosophy was to encourage people to stay within the improvements on the property and maintain the integrity of the native landscaping that's going in here, which is substantial and beautiful. When you see it, you'll be blown away. I was, at least.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Anything else, Michael? No. Okay. Yeah, you know, I'm sort of with Lou on this. When I first looked at it, I went, what? You know, one of the things that we, as you know this, Andy, that we don't love it when people come back and say, well, thanks for giving us permission, but we did this instead, right? But, you know, in this case, I think, you know, the point is well made that this does not change negative declaration. It does not change anything, really. We would have, if you had come to us with this plan, we would have said, okay, right? You know, which is to me the, you know, kind of ultimately the decision point. So yeah, I kind of agree that this is kind of a net gain for the neighborhood, and I don't really have an issue with what transpired here. So we'll do the questions. And the first is, does the board agree that the modification is consistent with the original secret determination?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Does the board want the applicant to affirm their ability to satisfy the conditions of a site plan and zoning board's conditions of approval? Yes. Oh yeah, we don't exactly know what they are, but of course, conceptually, yes. Should the applicant indicate their intentions for the 3 unconstructed roof decks?
Yeah.
Yes, you should.
Yeah, they're not being.
Yeah,
Should we have a condition?
clarify that.
I did say that there's no way to access them, but when they enclose those stairways, there would be no access, but there is no intention to construct them. I think they built one, said, hey, this is pretty nice, but do we need them on the other 3 units? And the answer was no.
Okay. So how can we affirm that, Tina? Is there some way?
I think you could approve the building plan.
So yeah, in the building plans, they're not shown, and in the narrative, we could just say that the scope has changed to, you know, not include roof decks. We could do that.
Can we do the same thing with the kitchen?
Yes, I was
yeah,
gonna say
that's a good
that.
point.
I think we should, right? So we'll modify it to say, you know, the approval's changed to these size buildings, these size patios, no kitchens, the gate, you know, like all the changes we'll enumerate. Great.
Okay, great. So final question, is the modification request acceptable to the planning board?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. All right. Yeah, now it is.
Now it is.
Now it is.
The same thing when I read it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I apologize. I didn't want to be here on Wednesday night either. So I don't like when they do this either. But what happens?
So we have a couple of items for our regular meeting. You were here for 9 Blue Jay, aren't you? I can't believe we missed that you were in the audience. We were going to do this first if you were here. We missed that you were, because we made you sat through this 2 meetings to get to this point, right? Okay. All right, so we're gonna do you first.
Honorary member.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that might be you, but anyway. All right, so this is a resolution regarding the request of 9 Blue Jay LLC, Stefano Briganti, for a building permit at the address of 9 Blue Jay Way in East Hampton. Let's see, what do we need to say here? That the building inspector can issue a building permit for those premises, and you are securing road improvements for that undertaking, and it is in the undertaking is in the amount of $23,000. And these requirements should be subject to review 1 year from the date of this resolution, or March 5th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve? Or do I do that?
You think you do that?
Okay.
You want a second?
I want a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Hello, everyone. My name's Daniel Fonte. I'm with the builders over at 9 Blue Jay. And we were wondering if it would be possible to reduce the amount of linear footage that's on there. It's 529 linear feet from Buckskill Road intersection. And it takes us well past the neighbor to our side. And as you can, if you're familiar with the area and the aerial view, you'll see that we never took any trucks or anything all the way down Blue Jay Way because it's impossible to turn around. So anytime they came in, they would have to back up to Buckskill Road. And so the area of wear and tear of the asphalt stops essentially up to our property line, furthest from Buckskill Road. And we've done the pricing recently, and it's exceeding nearly double the amount of money that's currently in the bond for $23,000. We're getting pricing of like $50,000.
Wow.
And we're at the end of the project, and as you would all know, typically the budget's been exhausted, which is where we're at, and we're at the point of getting ready for our C of O. And we were hoping to get up to our property line, which is just under 400 feet, but that would also help us with our budgets and keep it within that realm of what the initial bond was.
Okay. Who determines that, Tina?
So the road assignments are produced by the engineer. He does them by, analyzing the length of roadway that needs to be built out with the map and kind of trying to equalize it among the properties in the map. Have you raised this with the engineer? I didn't see any comments.
No, because
Okay.
we basically received the approval, and then we were told we need to, any comments we would have to present here.
Okay.
So that's
So,
why.
yeah, that's interesting, because usually they go to the engineer first. So who did you,
Yeah,
I'm gonna get your number so you and I can talk, but I
yeah,
mean,
no problem.
what I'd like you to do is, email me the estimates you got so I can share those with the engineer and I'll talk with him.
Okay.
But again, they're done based on a formula trying to be fair to everybody in the area that has to that is along, you're on Montauk Shores here. This is the property, right? Is this your 9 Blue Jay Way? Yeah.
That's us
okay,
right there. So it gets us to like almost here.
Yeah.
Just shy of that next intersection, so it's over here.
Okay.
So we end up like way
that's
past.
right.
Yeah, so sometimes they're not even like in front of your property, like you at least even did some in front of your, sometimes they're not even anywhere near your property, they're just to build out the road. I mean, and I can ask him to take another look, and just confirm that his calculations were correct, but we don't do it based on pricing,
So, I mean, you should at least understand the formula that's being used
We
to.
understand that, and we understand, we have needs, but we're also trying to stay within budget so we can get to the finish line. So we just want to kind of present our case here and see if there was any hope to reduce that.
So we can't make, many changes to the resolution, so I think that's your best
But I want
path.
to raise it up here in case there was any advice that could be offered for us.
Right, so I think you got what you need
Yep, and
there.
I would say just give us your analysis and then, you want to write your email address here and then I'll reach out to you so you can
All right.
get this looked at.
So while you're doing that, we'll move on to the second board of review, which relates to 9 Front LLC, Dina Zenger, for a building permit for premises located at 2 Hawthorne Avenue in East Hampton. This is an undertaking that would be in the bond in the amount of $18,000. Thank you very much. Again, these requirements were subject to review 1 year from the date of this resolution, or March 5th, 2026. And I call for a second on this resolution.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So as long as we're on this path, let's do the old filed map modifications. And just for the record, what we've determined to do going forward, we have not typically been including documentation regarding filed map modifications and posting them with the other documentation for our meetings. But due to some comments from the public, we are beginning to do that. These are generally, pretty low impact administrative actions, but there are people in the public who are interested in the details of what they are. So we are posting them, and just a notice to the public that if there's comments about them, we prefer to get them prior to the meeting. So that's where we are with that. So the first is the old filed map for map number 171, section 3, East Hampton 3. This relates to parcels at 21 and 23 Abraham's Path. And this really has to do with amending some errors. Charlie, is that correct? And making sure that a couple of lots are not landlocked and removing something that shouldn't be on the map. At a high level, that's what this is about. I'll call for a motion to approve the map modification.
A second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
We have questions in the back. You have to answer the question.
Are there questions?
Do we?
We send it to the town board.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Right. So that's the process,
question.
Charlie. We're recommending these to the town board for approval?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so then, the town board, they're the ones that act on the change.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. There you go. So does the planning board agree that this application should be recommended to the town board for approval?
yes.
Okay, good. And another one, which is an old filed map modification, Sean McGee, 39 and 41 Roosevelt Avenue in East Hampton. Map number 877, urban renewal parcels 18 and 20, block 6, lots 21, 22, and 23. So this involves lots on Outlook and Roosevelt and Harborview Lane. And again, this is an amendment, an administrative amendment to remedy a few inaccuracies on those maps and making sure that an abandonment of some right-of-ways are not creating a landlocked situation. So I'll call for the adoption of this amendment.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor? Aye. Good. All right, closing in on it here. So I think, Bruce, you have a subdivision extension of time for Mosswood.
Mosswood, yes, I do. Okay. In the matter of the application of Mosswood preliminary subdivision, Suffolk County Tax Act number 300-157-2-15.3 and 16. They're looking for an extension of time. I read the information in front of us and look for it to be moved.
You get to get the date, right?
Oh, the date.
April 3rd, 2026, maybe?
I did not see that anymore.
Number 3.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay, yes, an extension of time for a period of 1 year or until April 3rd of 2026.
1 year or April 3rd, 2026.
Right.
Charlie,
So they get a year and a month.
For extension of time.
Yeah, 1 year or till April 3rd. Is that?
Yeah, that would be, by the time it gets.
All right, so it's to April 3rd, basically, right? Okay.
Unless they're done earlier.
Yeah, unless it's done earlier. There you go. Okay.
So what do I do? As
Just call for its adoption.
Yeah, call for its adoption.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Guys got me
And
off track.
I think, Reed, you have the Jackson commercial one.
Yes, in the matter of the application of Jackson Commercial Site Plan, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-166-6-1 for an extension of time until April 3rd, 2025. I've read the resolution and I move for its adoption.
25 or 26?
25.
That's a month from now.
That's only a month from now.
It says. It says,
Mine also
with the
says
conditions of the board's resolution.
Wait, does that say that too?
Ready for their
I thought
samples,
yours
they
did
just
say
need a couple
26.
Mine does say.
But they just need 2 months to get a C of
Okay.
Okay, all right, so that's correct.
Okay.
All right, do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. And finally, Beach Plum Resort Deck Extension.
In the matter of the application of Beach Plum Resort Deck Extension and Outdoor Shower, site plan, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-47-1-8, 9. It says, I'm just going to read this. Based on the foregoing, the planning board hereby extends the time within the applicant, which the applicant must comply with the conditions of the board's resolution in 1-year increments, within which to obtain a certificate of occupancy, or until April 10, 2025. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
I've read the, it's not a resolution, I've read the application and I move for its adoption.
Second.
All in favor? Great.
Aye.
All right, good. Minutes, everybody, minutes. You have read them. Jen, I'm sure read them, word for word.
I did.
Up and down. Any changes, comments, thoughts about them?
Yeah, there was one minor spelling under amend chapter 255 zoning.
Oh,
somewhat in favor instead of if favor, maybe, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's all I saw.
Wait a minute.
In, yes, not if, in.
It's in favor, right?
Somewhat in favor, somewhat in favor. Okay. All right, a call for adoption of the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Jody, for that. Would someone like to make the next motion?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll count that as both. Yeah, we'll count that as a second and a first. All in favor of adjourning?